Hey everyone, hi running coach and Hoka athlete Sage Canaday here with another training talk. I believe this is episode number 56. Thanks so much for all your comments and suggestions. We're gonna roll with this. We talked about 80-20 training a couple talks ago, always preaching for the last 15 years, building your aerobic base with a lot of slow, easy paced running, building up the volume is the real key there. And I was actually in a discussion on this on the Let's Run message board threads about Vo2max, maximum aerobic capacity, and running economy or running efficiency, which I've also done a lot of talks. If you check out the playlist, 5K training, half marathon, marathon training, ultra marathon, you could see that. I'm not going to define it in this video, but well, actually, I'll redefine it. Vo2max, think high intensity, max aerobic capacity, up to 100% of maximum heart rate, right? All out, but not an all out sprint, like not an all out 30-second or 400-meter repeat, but something more like 3K to 5K race pace, right? Something you could hold all out in an even pace race for like 8 to 10 minutes. That is Vo2max pace or velocity for a runner. Cycling test might be a little different, but it's about progressively loading yourself up to 100% of your max heart rate. It's how much oxygen is getting delivered to your muscles. It's kind of the icing on the cake for 5K runners, 10K, half marathon. But it does matter in marathons and ultras, and that's kind of the whole point of this talk, is talking about how to structure your training in the realm of thinking aerobic-based training, a lot of easy miles, but still getting in some high-intensity stuff to give you that extra edge to reach your full potential in the sport. You're going to need a Vo2max training, and it's not just for the sake of improving the Vo2max number, which is a number, by the way. It's for improving your running economy and efficiency at all relative paces, maybe submaximal paces that are slower than your Vo2max, right? If your Vo2max pace is 3K race pace or even 5K race pace for an elite, how much slower are you running at half marathon pace or marathon pace, right? Well, you're working at fractions of that pace, fractions of Vo2max, fractions of your maximum heart rate. So if you could increase that efficiency, you could run longer at a higher intensity. You're going to be racing faster. Your marathon time is going to come down, right? If you could get closer to 90% max heart rate for a full half marathon or 10K, then maybe you could run your full marathon at closer to 80 or 85% of your max heart rate. You're going to be improving a lot more. And so it's an efficiency thing, which we call running economy. Now, Sandy and I wrote a book several years ago. It's called The Sage Running Secret, A Guide to Speedy Ultras. This is a plug. You could check it out, ebook on Amazon. How to run faster at any surface, any distance. And I had a whole chapter on there on how to break down running economy versus Vo2max. And we have the whole car analogy, right? If your body is like a car, maybe you're a Mustang, maybe you're a Toyota Prius, maybe you're a Subaru Baja, maybe you're a Jeep or Monster truck. Vo2max would be like the horsepower of the car, right? Raw engine power, and you could rev that thing up. But the running economy is like your fuel efficiency, or how many miles per gallon you get, liters per kilometer of petrol, right? So these two things balance each other out, and that will predict your overall performance depending on what type of car you might be. So we look at these two things separately, but they're also intertwined in a kind of a complex way, actually. Vo2max, redefining it, it's a number, and I wouldn't go off your watch's estimate. You need to get it tested in a lab if you really want it. But it's just a number, it's all relative. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It helps to have a high Vo2max, but only if you want to be an elite. As I said on Let's Run, over 65, 70. A lot of elites are going to be in the high 70s or even in the 80s as distance runners at the very elite level. Whereas, you could make big improvements and your Vo2max might stay the same or even drop. It will drop as you get older generally, but it's milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute of exercise. So that's kind of the number we're looking at. And running economy or efficiency is also defined by oxygen usage in a number like that as well. But they're intertwined. You get a lot of benefits with Vo2max, with high intensity Vo2max training. You're also going to have a lot of benefits generally when you're younger. In your 18, in your 20s, in your early 30s, Vo2max is kind of at the highest, especially if you've been training it at high intensity for a long time. But the key thing for long-term improvement has always been running economy, and we preach that in the book as well. So why even bother doing Vo2max training? Why even bother doing this high intensity training that's much harder than lactate threshold or tempo run training? If we bring up the pace intensity spectrum, we see Vo2max training is in the red zone, right? We're looking at zone 5, zone 4 to zone 5 on the 5-pace, 5-zone theory. People in the 80-20 say, oh, it's an absolute no-no. You're developing a lot of lactic acid. It's going anaerobic, so to speak. So that training does need to be limited. It's very powerful. It's very stressful. It could lead to injury or overtraining. There's always an injury overtraining risk, especially when you start mixing in these high intensity things. But the speed matters, right? What do they say? Speed kills those that don't have any. And even in a long distance race like a marathon or ultra marathon, there's always some element of speed. There's always some element of power, right? You wouldn't want to go out in the mountains in maybe a Toyota Prius. It might be a little hard with the ground clearance, but you don't want to run out of battery power when there's no electric charging stations. Shout out Tesla. Whereas if you've got a hybrid thing going on, you've got high clearance, better suspension, maybe your horsepower is not super high for drag racing on a track, but maybe you're better off-road, going back to that car analogy. So it's about adding more tools to your toolbox, adding more versatility to your training so you have more wiggle room and extra adaptations and versatility in your racing. If you're moving up in distance or if you're moving to the trails, you got to deal with the power of going up and down mountains or hills, maybe at altitude, and adapting to those conditions, but making you a well-rounded athlete who doesn't just do LSD, long slow distance. You're not just slogging out the miles for the sake of doing easy aerobic base miles and keeping it under this relatively low arbitrarily defined heart rate like in Moth method, which I've criticized a lot. There is a lot of truth to that though. So 80%, 90% of the miles, easy aerobic base building. Well, after you start getting your mileage up really high, maybe 50 miles a week, 80K a week, people see a lot of benefits in that mileage range if they have the time and energy for it and they stay healthy. You get aerobic base, you're improving your running economy, improving your efficiency, even without speed work. But you start throwing in some strides a couple times a week, easy leg turnover stuff. Maybe you're doing a tempo run. Maybe you have some element of a long run. So you're hitting that zone 2, zone 3. You're hitting some 80%, 85% max heart rates, moderate aerobic based up tempo types of runs. Well, what comes after weeks and weeks and months of doing that? The icing on the cake is the high intensity stuff. And the high intensity stuff could be 1 or 2 minute hill repeats. They could be, and we have these built into all of our higher running training plans, by the way. It could be 8x800 meter repeats. That's a good Vo2max type of workout. At 5K goal pace, 800 meter repeats, kilometer repeats, maybe even mile repeats. Maybe it's a fartlek workout where you're doing surges, high intensity surges, kind of in the 2 to 3 to 4 minute range at over 90, 95% max heart rate. You're developing some lactic acid. Your lactate levels are getting over 4 millimoles, right? So, people would be, oh no, don't do that. It could lead to overtraining. And it could lead to injury doing speed training. And you get the boost in Vo2max because of adaptations with clearing lactate, but also you could get an extra hypertrophy, swelling of the left ventricle in the heart, mainly for younger athletes. You get that heart elasticity. The heart is used to beating very fast, but also with a bigger stroke volume. It could beat more blood faster, so you get faster oxygen delivery to your working muscles. There's other things at the cellular level that is going on. But the main thing, especially for distance runners, especially if you've been running for a longer time or you're in your late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, is that you're improving your efficiency or running economy because you're doing speed training. And that's really the missed key, I think, with a lot of things. With you look at Jack Daniel's distance running formula and the books, and you're doing strides, you're doing reps, you're doing some speed work, so to speak, hill sprints, stuff like that. But the Vo2max work is also really good speed training for the marathoners and ultramarathon runners, right? So Vo2max might be more specific to determining 5K race performance because that pace and that intensity is closer to racing an all-out 3K or 5K. But for distance runners, marathoners, ultramarathon runners, half marathon runners, if you can improve your efficiency at all levels at this higher end speed, hopefully then it translates into improving your efficiency at marathon race pace or ultramarathon race pace, or at least tackling hills or mountains in ultramarathon races. So the idea is that at the neuromuscular level, you're moving faster, you're getting a higher stride rate, more power in your stride. At the muscular level, you're actually developing a lot of strength running, 5K pace or faster on a track or up and down hills or cross-country style, doing these short high-intensity repeats at high heart rates. But it's not just for those cardiovascular benefits. It's not just for the heart and lungs to adapt and improve at the cellular level with blood flow. It's for the muscle fibers, the fast twitch muscle fibers to activate, for your running form to get more dialed in, for you to get more glute activation maybe, more pop and power to your stride, so that when you slow things down, you're moving more efficiently. You've improved your running economy, so to speak, because of these things that have happened with the leg muscle strength that you've improved. So running economy is a little more tricky. It's intertwined. You're competing at a higher percentage of your Vo2max. So if your Vo2max is 50 or 40 or whatever number it is, it doesn't really matter, because now you've gotten closer to that full potential by improving your efficiency, your running economy, and that is the real reason why you would want to do some speed training. We call Vo2max training more speed training for long distance runners, whereas if your focus was the 1500 meters or the mile, maybe pure speed training would actually be pure hill sprints, 8-second hill sprints, or 100-meter repeats or 200-meter repeats. You do the Vo2max stuff a lot of times just for the heart rate spikes, but also for this muscular power and to get yourself that extra edge. It's the extra icing on the cake, so to speak. If your aerobic base was the body of a cake, then the Vo2max and high intensity work would be the icing on the cake. So, that's really the key takeaway with this talk. Don't neglect the high intensity speed training. It could give you a lot of edge, and it gets you up to your full potential, but only after you've stayed healthy by building the aerobic base first and you've reached a relatively high peak weekly mileage, how many kilometers or miles you run in a week, because you want to do it safely and progressively and effectively. And how you manipulate the workouts is very important in this regard. You don't want to overtrain or overstrain, get an injury or pull a muscle or something like that. So work into it gradually, pace things well, stay healthy out there. Thank you so much for following along this training talk. Comment below with future training talk topics you'd like to hear about or follow-up questions on this talk. Again, check out my extensive playlist. Been doing these videos on YouTube for over 13 years now. Thanks to title sponsor Hoka, keeping the dream alive, as well as check out our training plans that Coach Sandy and I have at higherrunning.com. Also check out her channel, Running Wild. Thank you so much to Patreon supporters for keeping this channel alive. Hope you're doing well, and stay tuned for more Vo2max Productions.